Oh, there we go. Good afternoon, good evening, and which other time zone everyone may be in. Welcome to today's webinar. So we have a few more people which we know will be joining, but we'll use the time to get a few welcomes through the door. A few familiar names in the list. So thank you guys for being here. And for the people who don't know yet, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Martin Kuhn from iUniversal. I founded the company in 2018 with my business partner, Jan Hüvel, which a lot of you may know from other products in our industry. And we have quite an honor today to have Patrick Fairhay with us, who will be introducing himself shortly, and which I'm glad to say was actually the guy who trained me on another product, which is known for media servers. Ages ago, really absolutely ages ago, and it's quite fun. I'll have to scan it one time. I just found my notes of my first media server basic training written on paper in crayon in a small dark studio in Zurich. A lot of things still apply. Some things have changed. Yeah, and I'm absolutely thrilled that we have Patrick here today, which will be walking us through a webinar, a very hands-on webinar in regards to corporate show programming. Before we hand over to Patrick, a few organizational things. We'll be recording this webinar. It will be available online as a download on YouTube on our website, as always, so you can work through the things yourself at your own pace. Also, everything we are doing today is based on the latest beta version of Vertex, which you can find in your user account. So if you have an account on iUniversal.com, simply go to My Support, downloads, and you can download the latest beta version. Then you'll have all the features we are using today. And last but not least, we highly encourage you to shoot questions at any time. Really, this is what these webinars are for. Stop us at any time if you're stuck, if you don't understand something, if you have questions. You'll find a small Q&A function here in Zoom. Use it, pose us questions, and we'll be gladly either to answer them directly in the chat. We always try to put them into the video so you get the answer from us directly in speaking, or if it's something project related, we will then reach out to you at a later stage via email. So it's not, those are the three options we have. And with that, I would say I'll gladly hand over to Patrick, who will do a short introduction and then take us onto the journey of corporate show programming.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. And thank you for having me here today. And I'm very glad that I'm able to get you some insights on my current work, Vertex, and my corporate show background. Quite a good amount of the people in this webinar know me, as Martin said, from other media server adventures and trainings. And yeah, the history is moving on. So I'm now also a trainer for Vertex, and I'm already using it on quite a few shows, big corporate shows. And I'm very happy to give you some insights and take you through a show programming of a show which I've done in November. Don't worry, we're not going to program the entire show because we probably won't spend 3 or 4 days on this webinar now. I give you an insight from basically how the design brief started to how we then set up a system and how we actually went through the timeline programming for this, because it's quite a nice setup. Just going to start sharing my screen for that. Everybody who came in early already saw this picture. So this is basically what I would say a generic random corporate show setup as you would find it in probably most of the venues in the US, but also around the world. This particular one is in the Orange County Convention Center in Orlando, Florida. Happened in November for the IAPA opening ceremony. But as I said, it's kind of like every random corporate show I've done in the last 5 years probably would have used a similar complex setup like this. So it's a bit like a basic setup. In this case, it was a front projection screen on this side, another front projection screen on the other side, rear projection screen in the center, which did lead to some fancy color issues, as you can see on the picture, which we needed to sort out later, but we'll jump back to this a little bit later. So yeah, as I said, quite random setup. This is a little bit later in the process where you see some of the actual content, still no chairs or tables in the room, so we were still programming In this particular show, we did program a total of 6 shows, 1 for each day. So we kind of switched from show to show to show. You can also see my front of house setup in here. I've been discussing this a lot with people, especially now that I am in the US, whether the media server operator should sit front of house or back of house. I don't know what you guys usually prefer to do. I am voting a big for the front of house position because you can actually see your screens and you have a better overview of things which are happening, and you're not getting stuck in like, oh, something is wrong on that screen, what might that be, especially on setups like this, where you need to see what you're doing. So as I say, these are just a few impressions of how the show looked like, different content types, different things. So this was like during the rehearsal where you see some other stuff. But as I said, quite like any pretty much generic corporate show you would think of. You see, I use 2 monitors for my user interface. This computer over here is pretty much my backup machine. So this was running a session member for the show. And then I did get a multi-view out of the E2, which was the final switching position. So basically what we did here is one machine with 4 outputs, 2 outputs going to this, 2 outputs going to this side screens, and then 1 output from another machine going to the center screen. So 2 machines, 4 outputs on the first, 1 output on the second, and then the same setup as a full backup, and with the same amount of outputs on the same resolution. Again, this is like what the kind of the first picture you've seen. So I've been using these test patterns, but I've also been using test scripts, which is the first step to walk through when we go into programming. So if I exit this, one thing to look at real quick is we're going to come back to this later on when we walk a bit through how this show came together. This is pretty much like what the cue sheet was looking like. I keep on using this for trainings because I like it, because the information here is really, really bad. It's a bit like, oh, half of the things didn't really happen, half of the content names were wrong. Like it kind of has everything which everybody knows from any random show. These files weren't named as they were. So yeah, it's quite like, what do you look for? Basically, at the end of the day, I've mainly been looking at my QIDs, and you're going to see later on how I set it up with QIDs and how I walk through the shows coming from QIDs. So if we start in Vertex, as Martin said, this is the latest version. So we're currently running on the 1.8.1.7 beta version, which you can download from the website at the moment. To be honest, I'm using this version now the very first time, so I might encounter some features which I haven't seen before. So bear with me if I might need to go back or forth a few times to actually see what happens. But what I've seen so far is really nice because a few new things came in, like the filter section down here, which is nice to sort things or look for things.
Still seeing your Google Doc, so you may have to get that out of the way. Yes, no Vertex yet.
My Google Docs.
But yeah, maybe until that's finished, just to give you a little heads up on the beta, the beta has now been out there on productions for quite a while and will be entering release phase in shortly. And the main reason for it is we have a lot of new filtering built in, which Patrick will show you. And also what will be part of another webinar, the complete node system is in there. So those are the main differences. And we are back in Vertex.
You're seeing me now. Great.
Yes.
Interesting. Zoom, beautiful. Okay, I won't be switching around too much in programs now anyway, so it's fine. So yeah, as I said, this is the latest version. So if I get stuck at some point where there's a new feature which I haven't encountered yet, I will probably cheer up and say, great, that we have it now. So basically, what I've done is this is quite like a clean project. So there is no surfaces in, there's no canvas in, it's just all cleaned out, like clean start from scratch. I obviously don't have the machines connected to my system, so I'm going to scrap that whole part, but I'm going to walk you through the pre-programming as you would do it if you don't have the online machines into it. So the first step I always do is I'm going to go into my content folder. I'm going to talk a bit about content setup and content organization in a bit as well. So somewhere in here are my templates. I'm going to take all of these 3 templates into my system. And then with these, you can see that I have one for the center screen, one for the left, and one for the right screen. They are following the pixel size I've been given by the projectionist or what you've been given by the LED people. What you would do next is you would set up a canvas. And this is always something when I do trainings, I ask the people about the best way, how to set up your canvas for setup like this. There's no right or wrong way. There's a good or bad way. There's different ways. So everybody does it a little bit different. I usually try to do my canvases following to my screen positions or screen areas. So in this case, quite basically, I would have 3 canvases. So I add 3. And then I would give my canvases names, which would follow the screen size. And I would also give them the correct screen measurements. They took a number from my desktop now, which I don't want. So what I want to do is I want to take the first one and I would do this to be the left screen. So the size would be 3584 times 1080. And then I would also rename this to left screen. Big discussion, especially in DS. Is it stage right, stage left, or left screen or right screen? You can vote for it in the Q&A box if you want to. I'm a very big fan of left, center, right as the audience sees it, because the content creation team, they don't understand stage directions. They usually look onto the monitor as the audience would look onto the screens in the venue. So in this case, it would be left, center, right. So my next canvas would be center, which would be 1920 1080. And it would be named center. And the third one, quite obviously, would be again 3584 and 1080. And the beautiful thing on this one now is because we don't need any outputs or any surfaces yet, we can start and program our entire show even without knowing what we end up in terms of surfaces and stuff, like projector setup and things like that. So if that changes during the programming time, I don't really care too much. In the real world, if you have your machines online, you would obviously need to add surfaces to your canvases, but I'm going to skip that at the moment because I don't want to waste time on this one. And I think Martin did cover this whole story about canvases and surfaces in a different webinar.
There's a webinar out there. There's also a few tutorials just to keep it really, really straight and simple. Vertex is content output independent. So like an artist, you work on your canvas. The canvas is then you take a part of your canvas by what is called a surface, which is then assigned to a output and puts whatever that surface is seeing in your canvas onto an output that allows you to not have to program on a machine, on a video layer, but really work independently in a canvas. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if you get 2 HD projectors, 2 4K projectors, 8 projectors, 2 projectors, who cares? It's really just adding the surfaces onto your existing canvas.
Yeah, and as I said, this is what I like in the flexibility of this of Vertex is I don't really care about it right now. I don't really care even if I need to change the machines on site in terms of which output goes where. If the assignment changes for whatever reason, my programming isn't affected at all because everything I do is on the timeline relates back to the canvases. And therefore, all of my compositions and everything is still where it should be, even if I change my system count or my output count or whatever. Quite obviously, right now, I only have one system in here, which is obviously my master system. I don't have any machines connected to my network at the moment. So if you would have, all of the other systems would be connected here, and then you would need to assign outputs to surfaces. But as I said, this is a different story, and we won't have enough time on this one to go through all of that. So let's go back to our timeline sequencing. Before we do, or we could quickly start doing some stuff on the timeline, but usually what I do next in my order is I want to make sure I organize my content as much as I can. Everybody who's done corporate shows or other big shows knows content will be messy and it will be madness, and you will get tons and tons of replacement files, and you will get wrong namings and all of that stuff. Obviously, you can load all of your content into this content folder and have it all in one place, and you can scroll up and down like madness, and you don't find the stuff quickly as you want to. For me, it's very important to be able to find the stuff very quickly. One thing which I've just learned from Martin before is that the new content layout, when you go to file names, actually allows you to sort by format, by name. You can even sort by size. So this is one of the new features in this beta version. And you can also search for file types if you want to. Obviously, not now, it doesn't show anything because I don't have any HAP file in here. So that's a big help if you know the file name. Like, you know, okay, I'm looking for the grid. You just type grid and you get everything in your entire content library, which has the name grid, and you can take it from there. But I still try to be as organized as I can. So the first step would be actually to build collections. Where is my add collection? There we go. And on these collections, and now I need to go back to my queue list, they usually follow my queue list. So if I go to my queue list, I hope you can see this now. Martin, are we seeing the Google Docs now? Okay, so we're back where we should be. So what I would have is I would have a collection called 101 pre-show walk-in, especially if you have like multiple screens and you have multiple files for this section. It does make sense to have one collection for this part, and then you would have another collection for this part. It sounds like a big amount of collections. However, if you want to quickly find the background video, which goes into the intro how make evoy, then you only need to know the queue number, and you can organize everything by the queue ID. And you would have a collection called 104 intro, whatever the name is, and all of the files you need in here are in there. And one of the beauty things, or one of the great things in Vertex, is that the collections are actually not like folders. They are more like picture albums, if you want so. So you can have one file in multiple collections, but that doesn't mean you have the file 10 times in your project. It will only be in once, but it's sorted into multiple collections. So if you have a background loop, which is going into every scene, you could technically put it into the collection for that scene. So if I would rename this collection now, my first collection would usually be something like 1000 and would be named templates or test patterns or something like that. What I also do is, and I'm only touching it very, very quickly to not run out of time, but I love to do these big shows as a multi-user setup. So I would have a secondary operator in the setup who's running on one session member, and he would take care, or she would take care of the entire content management, so that I'm, as the person who's actually programming the show, doesn't really need to touch any of the content files coming in. I don't want to check the files. That will be done by one person only looking at those files. And that person could actually also sit with the content people if they are on site and have a machine there and would be connected over the network. If I do that in this setup, what I would have in here is two collections. One would, not pressing F2 again, one would be actually called 000 or whatever new files. And then another one would be called 001 or something in the numbering, whatever you want, and would be called spread files. Basically, the idea behind this is that the second operator is loading all the new files into here, and then he would make sure that they are all transferred to the right machines in the right order, especially if you have big shows. And as Martin said, they again get very content heavy. You're not going to be able to transfer everything to every machine, so that somebody would need to take care of this content transfer. And then once these files are actually transferred to the playout machines, they would actually go into the spread or transferred file collection, so that I, as the operator programming the timeline, I would know, okay, there's 10 new files in here, which still need to go on the timeline, or I would drop them into other folders. That way I have a constant feedback by just looking onto my system about which files I actually have in my setup already on the system, which are already transferred, which are already programmed on the timeline. So all of the new files would actually come into this place. Let me take a couple of videos in here. Vertex training. Let's take all of these. So once they are actually transferred, now they're not transferring, quite obviously, they're only building a proxy file on my machine now. But once they would have been transferred, then that person would drop them into the next folder, which is the spread file folder. And then I can sort them from there. And once I have them on the timeline, I can sort them into wherever they need to go, if that makes any sense.
We just had a question regarding how can you decide if some content goes onto a certain system or doesn't go into a certain system. Yes, there are ways which you can link collections to certain systems, so they only share their content with that system. We won't have the time to cover it today, but if you go onto our iRSL.com/webinar, you'll find a webinar called Content Management, and that's where we cover how you can actually assign watch folders, collections to certain machines and have it spread out to those. So if you're interested in that, check out the webinar Content Management.
Yeah, okay. So the next step would be to start actually organizing my my sequence. So depending on how you like to organize your show, you can have multiple sequences. I usually try to have everything in one sequence, and I usually try to set up my entire show in a way that when the show is actually running, I only need to press play. I don't want to think about a lot. If somebody says video go, I'm going to press play. So actually everybody can run the shows I've programmed. Reason for that is if I ever come to the point where I drop off the chair and I'm sick or whatever, and I mean, especially nowadays with Corona testing and apps and all these things, you might come to the point where you're not allowed to work on the show day. Somebody needs to take over. And when your system is in a good shape, that's a very easy option. Or you actually would need to remote in from your hotel room. But I usually tend to program, and I've done this all my life, to program the show in a way that most of the time people would take over, would understand what I've done. This is also why I label everything in the right way and in a meaningful way, so that people understand what happened. So in this case of this show, what I would do is I would set up different sets of tracks, because I want to have a very nice idea about what is actually happening on which screen. I could put multiple videos on that one track, and then one of them is going to the center screen, one of them is going to the left screen, and one of them is going to the right screen. However, I would kind of organize my timeline in a way that I would add multiple tracks in here. And then those tracks would get default canvases, if you want. So let me add 3 more. Well, actually 5 more. We need to add multiple tracks, Martin. I don't know if I ever asked for this or not.
You haven't, but watching you now, I've already taken the note that we need to add multiple track function.
I never reported that.
The thing is, what you people don't know, Patrick is paid per click, so that's why he's doing it this way. No,
no, I usually report when I'm doing too many clicks, because I found doing too many clicks highly annoying.
Yeah, absolutely right. If you're looking for a function just for somebody who's maybe been looking something before in Vertex and you can't find it, always remember in the lower corner you can see we have different modes. So we have a standard, an advanced, and an all mode. That also affects the right-click menu. So if you can't find something you're looking for in your standard right-click menu, just jump into the all category or the advanced category, and you will get more selections to do things. In this case, it isn't there yet, but it will be there in the next beta. And I already have a message from our developers that the F2 bug is fixed as well.
Oh, nice. So I don't need to send you the
no,
file. Okay, cool.
Vertex has an integrated ticketing system. It's already done.
So what I do next is now I have these tracks in here. I would usually do for labels on there as well. Usually what I do is my top tracks are my audio track. I do play out a lot of audio in my shows. So very often I have multiple tracks or only one track in the audio world. So this would be my top track. And I also would have a collection which is called audio files, depending on what the show does. So let's do 1001 test audio. And let's quickly import an audio file in here. Import file. And then this would be sitting somewhere here. And this is also one of the standard things I pretty much always do when I program a show, is that I have a test set up in the beginning. So somewhere usually around 5 seconds. I never start my time in programming at 000 because I want to be able to actually go to stop my sequence and send everything to black. Just because it happened to me that I've been asked to do this, and then if there's content in the front, I would probably not want to have this in here. I could sometimes also like just simply start at any given time in here. So depending on how many audio tracks you have, that would be where they go, and they would all have a color and they all would be named according to what they are. What I then often do is I leave one track empty, and then this next one would be my left screen. So what happens now is you see there is no canvas on this container. So this would not go anywhere at the moment. What I then do is I make these contents be default canvas tracks. So I put this on here as a default canvas, and I take my clip container back onto this. And you see it's now on center because I picked the wrong one. Very clever. So this one would be left, and then I do 2 to go to left. And then when I take my left screen content on here, this will automatically be on left. And if I select my canvas, you see that it's on the canvas or on the left canvas automatically. So again, as I said, I'm going to label my tracks. So this track would also go to be left. It will get a nice color. Let's take this to red. Obviously, this one would be left as well now. Also getting a nice color. Then I would leave one empty. The reason why I leave one empty is just simply to have a better differentiation between my audio, my left, my right, and so on. So next would be center. And then obviously I want to put a grid in here, which would be on center. There we go. And again, color. Let's take green for this one. And as I said, I usually try to be very precise in how I set this up, including names and all of that, because then if somebody else works on this system, they would know what I've done and they would be able to kind of jump in and work with the same stuff. I need to add more tracks. Add tracks, more clicks, Martin. Another one. So this would be then.
Note is taken.
This would be left, center, right. And then right would be whatever color you want to do. Let's take something down there. Let's take this one. And then this one gets the same. And then again, template a canvas as default canvas to this track. And then I can simply put my content on it. So everything I do from here on in my show programming is following these assignments. So audio would go on here, left go here, right, center go on here, right go on here. If I need more than those tracks, I would add them. I would not come to the point where I eventually put a content piece onto the center track and assign the canvas to send it to a different screen. I would be able to do this. So if I put the right screen in here, it would actually take the canvas over. But I want to be very, very sure that those actually following my screen assignments or my canvas assignments. There's a different way how to do this, and I would hand over to Martin to give you a quick explanation on how to do this, because that just recently changed a little bit, which is called template clips. And I always get a little bit lost in that one if it changed where it is. So do I need to stop sharing my screen? Or you kicked me out anyway, right? There we go. But you're still muted.
There we go. You should be seeing my vertex now. I'm just going to try and get this little funny bar out of the way. There we go. So basically what Patrick showed you is the assignment of a canvas. That is very straightforward. Dustin, some things for you, but you may want to do some more, let's say, detailed things. So there's a new way of how to program a show, which is based on templates. So I'm just going to go build myself a sequence number 3. I'm going to call it my templates. I'm only going to use this to create templates. So something I can then assign to something else. I'll jump into my template sequence and let me just clear up my workspace. So you can see if I go to workspace live, this goes back into my default layout. I'll go to my templates and let me add a test pattern for the fun of it. I'm just going to grab a test pattern. There we go, and throw it onto here. So let's pretend everything, I'm going to be receiving some content in HD, but every content I receive like this is going to have to be a bit smaller, and it's going to have to be rotated 90 degrees. Let's say it's a pip which is coming in, or God knows what. So this is what I want every piece of content, which is a pip, to look like. So go to the filter section down here, type in template or just temp. You can see every object in Vertex can have a template clip and a template name. And the basic idea is something which has a template name can be assigned to something that's always a little checkerboard pattern, which will then take over those properties. So I'm going to give this a name, call it pip. There we go. From now on, I don't need this template sequence anymore. I can turn it off with this little button up here. Go back into my sequence. I'm going to add a track. There we go. I'm going to give it a label and call it pips. And now in here, you can see this track has a template clip. If you go to your clips, and this is actually still a little one of the last buggies we have in the, or not bug, which is a brush in the beta. It doesn't refresh yet, but in the clips category, you now have template clips, which my pip clip is in there. So if I go back to the track, go to settings, drag and drop my pip on there, I can now go over here and grab any content, drop it onto this track, and it will automatically take over the settings I have set in that pip clip. The cool thing is, if something changes, I can go back to my templates, grab my template clip, and move it to the left-hand side, turn my templates back off again, and you can see my pip did exactly the same thing. So these templates are now linked, and you simply have to update a template when you want to update multiple properties. So it's what Patrick was showing you with the canvas, just taking a step further for every property, even video effects, and this is a dangerous one, even keyframe animations. So if you have a certain, let's say you have something which flies in and flies out, the template clip would also take in the keyframe animation for you. So that's just a little round trip into templates. So I'll hand over back to Patrick.
Yeah, give me a sec. I need to go back to my screen sharing. There we go, share. So as I said, we won't have enough time to actually go through the entire show programming now. So what I'm actually going to do is just give you an idea about how I would set up my show from here on. Like if I take one of these videos, I can put it on. Where is it going to right now? Because I didn't put a template clip on. So if I put this on here, I would just basically make this a loop. I think we don't need to jump too deep into all of the settings here, that this would be FreeSync and it would be run. So this would be now part of my show programming setup. I could either do different clips on different tracks to assign them to the different screens. So basically, I would start building up my show from this setup now. What I would do when I build my show is I would always look into adding cues at the right moment. So like all of my cue markers would basically get cue IDs following up the cue sheet we had in the beginning. So if this would be my cue 101, this would be where my show starts. So if we go back to the cue sheet, this would be pre-show walk-in. Most of the time, I would have a separate computer on my show to actually have only the cue ID and whatever the cue does, to know what is actually what actually happens there. But what you can do is you can add another track and use the info clips. So basically, this would go all the way on the top, and you can add a where was that notes clip. So if you add this note clip all the way on the top, I love them because this now you can give them a full description 101 walk-in, and then this would show up in here, and I would right away know what's going on. I also came around with a little workaround, and I don't know if Martin actually even knows about this, but I've asked for a sticky notes window within our user interface because I want to have a list of all my cues. Jan will hate me for this, but what I actually do is I use the script editor. I drop it to the side, and I would now start to make a cue list in here. And just would write 101 walk in, 102 speaker 1 walk on, and on and on and on it goes. So basically, this would be my cue list until we get a cue list, proper cue list. Don't hit me. It was a quite simple workaround to actually have this list here, because what I then do is because in rehearsal time, you get to the point where people start coming, oh, can we now look at video 105 or 110? There's different options to actually go there. You can select all of your cue IDs from here. Let's add a few more cues to make it a bit nicer.
Maybe in the meantime, a little secret, what we are actually working on at the moment in regards to a cue list, and what you see here with the notes clip, that is built automatically, and that the cue list can also be shared with current cue runtimes and things like that over HTML. So you have quite an easy way to send a web page to everyone who's in the same network, that they can see the cue list, they can see where you are in the show, how much time is remaining. So that's something which is in the works at the moment.
That makes sense. Then I don't need to use the script editor for something which it is not made for. So basically, there's different ways now how to get to your cues. You obviously can choose the cues where you want to go to. Basically, nothing will happen until you actually select go to next cue, go to cue, or fade to cue. So this is the new feature, which actually would fade from one piece of video to another one. You don't see it if I don't put any content there. So let me put some content there. So if I go to Cue 103 now, if I jump, obviously, so if I go to selected cue, you will see this jump, and it will come in and load this clip up. If I fade to cue now, so if I select cue 101 and say fade to cue, it will actually wait a little bit, and then do a proper fade in between the cues. The reason why it waits is the preloading time for the other clips, so that it can do a proper fade, and it needs some time on my little laptop to actually move from these two relatively big clips, because it's kind of at the end of what it can do right now.
You can actually override that time if you want to. It's a default setting which can be changed, but as Patrick is mentioning, what we are really doing in this moment, Vertex is preloading both clips, so you can do a seamless fade even if you're playing back your sequence. So we don't recommend to do this on a really short time scale.
Yeah. But if you do rehearsals, it doesn't really matter. You can just simply jump to the cues as well if you want to. And this is also where I usually then come up with either building buttons within Vertex, but I've also built, because I had this already for another system, I'm not naming it, but I'm using a Stream Deck quite a lot. And I would like to show you how this is set up at the moment. So my Stream Deck setup looks like this. This allows me to actually go to set my sequence to play and pause, but it will also allow me to go to cue by cue IDs. So if I say go to 103 and press enter, it will go to cue 103. It doesn't do it from here, so I need to do it from the Stream Deck itself. There you go. So it straight away jumps to this cue. So wherever I'm in my show, the moment somebody asks me to go to a certain cue ID, I can just type these cue IDs in and jump to the cue. And what I can also do, because this is something which happens pretty much on every corporate show I've done, is when you run into a video, the first time they want to see the full 5-minute video, but then after that they don't want to waste the time in rehearsals, and they very often come up with a point where they say like, can we just see the last 10 seconds of this video? So what I would do is, if I'm here and I would start into this video, I have a button which is actually called last 20 seconds or last 10 seconds. It will automatically go to the next cue and then jump back 20 seconds to play this video on the last 10 seconds, or just only simply the last 10 or last 20 seconds, so that we can skip videos during rehearsals very, very easily. This was a very quick overview. I know I could go much, much deeper into this, which basically this show programming, what I do here is part of what I do as an advanced training usually. But Martin said we should allow some time for question and answers, and I already cutting some time out of this because Martin also wanted to show you some more options on what we can do with the Stream Deck.
Yeah, something very pretty for you. So it's no secret what Patrick was using for his show control is Widget Designer, a program which some of you may have seen or used. Definitely a program which is quite familiar in our office, as pretty much most of the widget development was being done by Jan Hüvel, who's moved by Versal. So yeah, it's a widget program.
This is the programming behind it. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool thing about widget is you can build everything yourself. In Vertex, the functionalities in widget are separated into the node system and the control views. So displaying buttons and displaying logic. And what you see here is pretty much a regular standard operator control. But in the recent years, there's a device out there or a program out on the market called Companion by Bitfocus, which is a free tool, which is absolutely amazing to do show control and assign buttons to a Stream Deck. And I'm just going to kick Patrick out of the screen share quickly, and we're going to be jumping over to my computer again. There we go. And you should all be seeing my web browser with a lot of stuff in the way. There we go. So can you see my web browser?
Yes. Well, I can see
it. That's good. Then everyone else can as well. So let's get that out of the way. So Bitfocus is a simple little program which allows you to control multiple machines. I'm pretty sure a lot of you are familiar with it. As of the latest version, you go type in Vertex. Then you get Vertex in here. In the edit field, you type in the IP address of your system. No idea what we're running on. 1138. So 1.138. 38, press save. If that's okay, you'll get a green little bar. And now when we go to your buttons, you have all the cool functions Patrick was showing you available in here. So I'll go into a regular button, go into Vertex, and then I can, for example, choose a play button, give it a playback ID, give it a name, type in play. So when I press this button, it will play playback 1. But I can also go ahead and, for example, choose Vertex fade to queue, which will ask me which playback, which queue, what is my load time, and what is my fade time. So you can now type in, for example, if it's a really short clip, you can, or a really small clip, you can type in 0.1 for the preload, a bit longer for the fade. So this is quite useful if you want to build these kind of things very simply. What it doesn't support, for which we would have to use either Vertex or something like Widget Designer, is, for example, to work with variables. What Patrick is doing, that you write a variable by typing in a letter. Companion doesn't support that. But just to get a fast button, this is actually quite useful. And what is really, really powerful, you can go ahead and type in or command a script. So if I go into Vertex, there's a little function called run script. So I could type in script number 1, and if I click this, it would execute script number 1 inside of Vertex. And for example, we're here in this little, in here you can see my script number 1 would be turning a playback off. I've done some comments here what the script does. Everything you see here is actually part of another webinar called Show Control, which you can download with the sample project if you want to. But just to give you an idea, you can now call any script inside of Vertex, which can be as complex as you want it, from one button press in the Stream Deck. So if you're not familiar with it, I highly recommend to have a look at the Stream Deck as for your everyday use. So in that case, I would say let's jump into some Q&A. Any questions? I see we've had quite a few we've been answering in the background. So we have a big vote from front of house programming, house left, center, house right. Definitely, I'd sign that any day. Then what we also have are, what is called the whole spreading of collections. That's a familiar one. Then do we have here versioning? Yes, I'm guessing most of you are probably familiar with versioning. Any content you have in Vertex can have a version. I'll just open up my screen again here. So if you have a content which you've been using on your show, normally you get test patterns in advance, and you may not have the final files yet, but then you can use your test patterns, or just pretend that this is the test pattern, use it wherever you want on your timeline, and then simply go ahead, right click, add version, import new version, and then you could grab a next file, and do something with that. So that's pretty straightforward. Any further questions?
I have a feature wish for that, Martin.
Please go ahead.
I like to be able to drag one file on top of the other and make this version 2.
Try to do it while holding Shift. I think it should actually already do the job.
Oh, okay. Did I raise this feature wish already?
I don't know. That's one of those things which has been there. Yeah, I think it's either Shift or just dragging on top, one or the other. Those are the daily tricks which people dive into at one point.
No, it's still denying to do it. Do I need to go from file name to file name, or from tile to tile?
From inside of Vertex. If you already have it in Vertex.
Yeah, in Vertex.
That's a feature wish. We have it from outside of Vertex.
That would follow my multi-user concept of new files and spreaded files, because then I can take this file out of spreaded files and drag it onto the old version, and it will automatically replace, rather than doing a new import with the right mouse click.
Note that one down. Until people are thinking of questions, I think if you are typing, I'll just use the time and get you a little overview of what we're doing here. So I'll open up the render editor. So this is pretty much what Patrick had built in, this one down here. What Patrick had built in his widget project. These are just a bunch of buttons which have a bunch of scripts in them, which allow you to, for example, fade to any queue change volume, change opacity, things like that. So we have some questions.
There's one from Jonas.
Yes.
I would like to jump on.
Please go for it.
The chat function is on. I raised the feature wish already very early, I think. I don't know if it's ever in, but I totally agree. It would be nice to have it. What I quite often do on bigger shows, if I don't have the second person for content management sitting close to me, is either a WhatsApp group or a good old Skype communication between them aside of Vertex. As I said earlier, I'm a big fan of multiple screens in my controls. So I most of the time have either 2 or even 3 screens as my control setup, so that I have enough room to actually have all of these things open at the same time. Notification when you get new files on the system, not straight away. You can build watch folders, but it's a bit like you need to monitor this. If you do that workflow I've just mentioned, you probably need to monitor this new folder when there's new files coming in.
That's definitely, maybe to jump in on that, the chat function is one on the list. We are definitely working on that one. And the notifications aren't there yet, but have prepared them in the background. So it's a function we thought about. If you click on any content and you switch to the advanced category, you'll see a little field which is normally hidden called user properties, which you can give things a note, a user identifier, things like that. That has all been prepared to raise special flags or to populate certain things, or where you can type in a note for someone on a certain content. So these things are in the making, but not done yet. Then we have a good question, not on timeline programming itself, but insanely important, which is masks. Yes, so you can, in the latest beta, you can go to add mask, which will generate a content for you. I'm just going to drag and drop it on the timeline for the ease. And up here for my selection mode, I can now change to my mask mode. You can see this has 4 points, which I can draw a mask. But you can now go ahead, switch the mode to add a point, click here, go back to edit. So now I have a second point, and you can even go ahead, click on this guy, add a Bezier, maybe down here, and then switch back to this edit button. And now I can go ahead and do a Bezier mask. And by clicking on the mask under the main category, I can even give it a softness if I need so, or give it certain colors if I want to. So if you're maybe sending it to another system, we're just going to be doing a keying. So that's the masking tool available in the latest beta. Any further questions? Otherwise, I would say we're pretty much on time. In that case, I would say thank you very much to everyone for attending today's webinar. Yeah, I hope you were able to pick up 1 or 2 tricks from the real world, I'll put it that way. I have a lot of notes. It's always interesting for us to see how people work. And we'll be definitely adding 1 or 2 things which we saw today to get the workflows even easier down the road. Thank you very much, Patrick, for hosting us today.
Thank you for having me.
I look forward to either seeing everyone from Europe at ProLight and Sound. We won't be exhibiting at ProLight, but Patrick will be there, I think, for about a day. I'll be there on Friday, the last day, and the next large trade show we'll be doing is going to be InfoComm in Vegas, where we'll be with a large booth in the North Hall. So if you want to stop by at InfoComm, you can find us on booth North 2575, which will be showing, the latest release version with Vertex, as long as the few new toys. We won't be sharing things quite yet, but it'll be worth the wait. So thank you very much and have a great day. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.